What's that? Take cover. It's another heretic!
Hello, everyone. This is another heretic or Brother Nathan, whichever you prefer. And this is going to be the start of what I hope will be a consistent and in-depth series um, on a rather interesting subject. It's related to some of what I've already covered on the channel regarding figures like Donald Trump and Colonel Sanders of KFC and all these different cultural elements as it relates to Freemasons and secret societies and things of that nature. Now, I was asked via email what I knew about Freemasons infiltrating the churches, Christianity, and that sort of thing. And I really don't know a whole lot except for perhaps some basic things. Um, so this study is going to be one of, I hope, several. And I have one more tab to open here, and let me open that and then we'll get started. So real quick here, I have another title added to my library on my website. And if you go there, you scroll all the way down, you'll find this book here by Tupper Saussy, okay, titled Rulers of Evil. Now, this is going to be the book that I'm going to be reading through for our study. This is available for free on my website. You could buy a hard copy if you wanted to. Let's see how much they go for. You could buy it hardcover for $450, or you could get it for Kindle at $7.99, or you could get it for free at my website or just by typing in the title and the author. You might wonder why it's for $450. Well, I believe it's because there are certain people who don't want us to know the truth. Now, this subject really is going to cover a lot of different bases. Mostly it's going to deal with the identity of Babylon. Now, real quick here, what I believe, here's my general overview, my opinion. My opinion is that everything that we see in the world is Babylonian as far as governments are concerned. So I know that Brother Daniel, for instance, he is of the opinion that the United States is Babylon, and I agree. But I still tend to believe that um, the major world religions, the major governments of the world, that they all together form Babylon. And I believe that the center or the head of Babylon is the Vatican. And I think that when we get into reading this book, I'm going to try to read one chapter for you each week and post it online. I think that reading through this book, we're going to get a history of the issue and we're going to begin to connect a lot of dots. So it will be very interesting. You can see here the title is Rulers of Evil, Useful Knowledge About Governing Bodies. Okay. So this is what we will be getting into eventually. What I would like to do for this video starting today is sort of give a primer or more of an overview, maybe a general broad analysis before we get into this book. So again, you can find it here at anabaptistapologist.com, which is my main website. Scroll all the way down. on the library tab. You can find it here. You can read along with us for those of us who are going to be following the readings along. Now, I'm going to introduce to you a new resource that might be helpful to some people, and I will give a disclaimer. This particular website comes from a movement within the Seventh-day Adventists, and these particular Adventists believe in the lunar Sabbath. I do not believe in the lunar Sabbath. There's some other things that they believe that I do not agree with. For instance, they are Paulinists, and if you know anything about me in this channel, I am not a Paulinist, okay? But it's still a decent resource, and it's called World's Last Chance. And if you go to World's Last Chance and you type in Jesuit or Jesuits, you will get a number of search results. I'm going to be reading from the first link, The Jesuits, A Brief Introduction. Okay. Now, the reason I'm showing you this particular resource is because it serves not only as a good overview and introduction to this very important subject about who the Jesuits are and what the Roman Catholic Church's mission is, but it's going to serve as an example of something that answers the question I received in the email. So I was emailed about what knowledge I have or what resources I have concerning Freemasons infiltrating Christian churches. And they asked specifically about whether or not people like Billy Graham or even John MacArthur are Freemasons. They relayed to me the fact that John MacArthur's he has family members. I think his father or someone in his family was a Freemason. I'll just put it out there and just say that. I don't know if John MacArthur specifically is a Freemason, but personally, I would speculate that he is, and I'll explain why, or it might become obvious as we go throughout the study. As far as Billy Graham is concerned, I think I would be comfortable speculating that it's possible that he also is a Freemason. And the reason I say I speculate is because I don't have hard proof. But there's an example in here in this particular study that is going to help us sort of inform just how careful and how discerning we have to be when we're handling sources like this, okay? So that being said, I'm gonna read the article and then I'll give my analysis, okay? So, the Jesuits, a brief introduction. Historic beginning of the Jesuits. As the Reformation of the 16th century began to triumph against the papacy, Rome summoned new forces, hoping to utterly destroy it. It was at this time that the Order of the Jesuits was created. This military order proved to be the most cruel and powerful of all the champions of popery. Cut off from every earthly tie and human interest, dead to the claims of natural affection, reason, and conscience, wholly silenced, they knew no rule, no tie, but that of their order, and no duty but to extend its power. The gospel of Yahushua had enabled its adherents to meet danger and endure suffering, undismayed by cold, hunger, toil, and poverty, to uphold the banner of truth in face of the rack, the dungeon, and the stake. To combat these forces, Jesuitism inspired its followers with the fanaticism that enabled them to endure like dangers, and to fight the power of truth with all the weapons of deception. There was no crime too great for them to commit, no deception too base for them to practice, no disguise too difficult for them to assume. Vowed to perpetual poverty and humility, it was their studied aim to secure wealth and power, to be devoted to the overthrow of Protestantism, and to the reestablishment of the papal supremacy. When appearing as members of their order, they wore a garb of sanctity, visiting prisons and hospitals, ministering to the sick and the poor, professing to have renounced the world and bearing the name of Jesus, who went about doing good. But under this blameless exterior, the most criminal and deadly purposes were concealed. It was a fundamental principle of the order that the end justifies the means. By this code, lying, theft, perjury, assassination were not only pardonable but commendable when they served the interests of the church. Under various disguises, the Jesuits worked their way into offices of state, climbing up to the counselors of kings and shaping the policy of nations. They became servants to act as spies upon their masters. They established colleges for the sons of princes and nobles, and schools for the common people, and the children of Protestant parents were drawn into an observance of Roman Catholic rites. All the outward pomp and display of the Roman Catholic worship was brought to bear to confuse the mind and dazzle and captivate the imagination, and thus the liberty for which the fathers had toiled and bled was betrayed by the sons. The Jesuits rapidly spread themselves over Europe, and wherever they went, there followed a revival of Catholicism. To give them greater power, a bull was issued reestablishing the Inquisition, notwithstanding the general abhorrence with which it was regarded. Even in Catholic countries, this terrible tribunal was again set up by Catholic rulers, and atrocities too terrible to bear the light of day were repeated in secret dungeons. In many countries, thousands upon thousands of the very flower of the nation, the purest and noblest, the most intellectual and highly educated, pious and devoted pastors, industrious and patriotic citizens, brilliant scholars, talented artists, skillful artisans, were slain or forced to flee to other lands. Excerpt from the Jesuit Oath. Quote, I do further promise and declare that I will have no opinion or will of my own or any mental reservation whatever, even as a corpse or cadaver. Parindi ac cadaver, but will unhesitatingly obey each and every command that I may receive from my superiors in the militia of the Pope and of Jesus Christ, that I may go to any part of the world whithersoever I may be sent, to the frozen regions of the north, the burning sands of the desert of Africa, or the jungles of India, to the centers of civilization of Europe, or to the wild haunts of the barbarous savages of America, without murmuring or repining, and will be submissive in all things whatsoever communicated to me. I furthermore promise and declare that I will, when opportunity present, make and wage relentless war, secretly or openly, against all heretics, Protestants and liberals, as I am directed to do, to extirpate and exterminate them from the face of the whole earth, and that I will spare neither age, sex, or condition, and that I will hang, waste, boil, flay, strangle, and bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women, and crush their infants' heads against the walls, in order to annihilate forever their execrable race. Though in the same cannot be done openly, I will secretly use the poisoned cup, the strangulating cord, the steel of the poniard, or the leaden bullet, regardless of the honor, rank, dignity, or authority of the person or persons, whatever may be their condition in life, either public or private, as I at any time may be directed to do so by any agent of the Pope or superior of the Brotherhood of the Holy Faith of the Society of Jesus. So real quick here, we have a picture of Pope Francis, and he is a Jesuit, if you did not know, which means he has taken that oath. So let's continue reading. Wolves in sheep's clothing. Yahushua, or Jesus, said, quote, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. Matthew 7:15. Here's Francesco Borgia, third Jesuit superior general. He said, quote, "We came in like lambs and will rule like wolves," end quote. The Jesuits were sanctioned in 1540 by Pope Paul III with one mandate: to defeat Protestantism and regain worldwide papal rule. To achieve this monumental task, they employ ever-adapting methods of pseudo-education, social programs, infiltration, and all wickedness that could possibly be conceived. Needless to say, they are achieving great success in their mission, which is escalating with the present Pope, Pope Francis, who held some of the highest positions in Argentina, including Provincial Superior in the Society of Jesus and Archbishop of Buenos Aires. He was made a cardinal by Pope John Paul II. Over the last 400 years, the Jesuits have succeeded in establishing the largest worldwide network of schools and universities. These prominent schools and universities have produced many well-known alumni. Thus, the Jesuits have been able to shape and mold the thinking of many famous world leaders and produce generations of political and religious leaders who were favorable to the Roman Catholic Church and her doctrinal agenda. The renowned British preacher Charles Haddon Spurgeon, when referring to the church ministers that graduate from these universities, said that, quote, "They keep back a portion of the gospel, having studied in the devil's new Jesuitical college." Source: Charles H. Spurgeon, A Solemn Warning for All Churches, sermon number 68. Jesuits sit at the top of the pyramid of secret societies. Quote, "There are still men and women about the country who will tell you with grim gravity that if you trace up Masonry through all its orders till you come to the grand tip-top, head Mason of the world, you will discover that the dread individual and the chief of the Society of Jesus are one and the same person." Source: James Parton, 1855, American historian. The Black Pope, M.F. Cusack, London, Marshall, Russell and Company, 1896, page 76. Given the above historic facts about the Jesuits, it is incredulous and most shocking to see the media and the world's religious and political leaders stampeding to endorse and praise Jesuit Pope Francis. We have no words to describe this unprecedented worldwide epidemic of memory loss towards Rome and her Jesuits. The prescient warning of General Sherman is most appropriate to quote today. Quote, "I would remind you of Webster's definition of a Jesuit: a designer, an intriguer. If the Church of Rome prevailed, the Pope would be the universal king. The Jesuits are here to plot and scheme, and, if possible, take from us the noble heritage of our civil and religious freedom. The rulers of the Jesuit order justify theft, licentiousness, lying, false witness bearing, suicide, and the murder of parents and other relatives. The greatest crimes in history committed against individuals and nations have been committed by the Jesuits. Wherever Jesuits are, they have the torch to burn, the sword to slay, the Inquisition to torture. They are the enemies of Bible-believing Christianity. They live for conquest, fortune, and glory." Source: General Sherman's Son, The Life of Thomas Ewing Sherman, S.J. Joseph, T. Durkin, S.J., New York, Farrar, Straus, and Cudahy, 1959, page 186. It is our duty as followers of Yahuwah to expose Rome and her Jesuits, and to pray for the utter destruction of their evil deceit. Prayer is the only weapon we have against this veiled enemy we face today. Rome and her Jesuits are the greatest enemy of the gospel and of humanity. Praise his name forever and ever. So there is the end of this, I think, a very good introductory article. We learn a lot, and there's also a lot in this article to look out for. And here's where some interesting stuff begins to unfold. So I'm going to pull up this here. Is, if you can't see it, this is the chart. One of the first things that we learn is that the Jesuits are basically a secret military, secret spy network. It's essentially a super intelligence agency, much like the CIA or FBI or Mossad or MI6, these sorts of things. But before all of that, there were the Jesuits. Okay. And this was formed in 1540 by Rome and by Pope Paul III. And the entire mandate of the Jesuits is to infiltrate and deceive, kill, bribe, any means necessary to turn Protestants in particular, but the whole world if possible, to Rome and bring everyone under the subject of Rome. Submit everyone to the doctrines of Rome. Okay. That's their number one, really their only goal. And again, they will stop at nothing to accomplish that. So I want to go up here and I want to highlight this statement here. It was a fundamental principle of the order that the end justifies the means. Okay. The end justifies the means. By any means necessary, they will bring people under subjection to Rome one way or the other. Now, the problem with this particular article is that they're not very careful. Let's go down here real quick and let's now read this. The renowned British preacher Charles Haddon Spurgeon, when referring to the church ministers that graduate from these universities, said that, quote, they keep back a portion of the gospel, having studied in the devil's new Jesuitical college. Now, what's interesting about that is the fact that, let me find the image here. Charles Haddon Spurgeon is a Freemason. Try to enlarge this here. So here on the right, we have a diagram, sign of the master of the second veil. And notice the right hand is hidden in the breast. Okay, this is from a Freemasonic diagram. And look at Charles Spurgeon and his pose. So notice he's pointing to the Bible as if that's where his authority comes from. But look at the hidden hand. The hidden hand of the Freemason. This signals that he is on their team. So Charles Spurgeon certainly is not contradicting himself. He's lying. He is deceiving. He's doing everything he's told to do in order to keep people under some authority of Rome. And you say, Nathan, Charles Spurgeon did not keep people under the authority of Rome. Oh, yes, he did, as do many pastors today. So at the start of the video, I referenced figures like Billy Graham, John MacArthur, and now we have Charles Spurgeon. So what do those Protestants have in common with Sunday? Or sorry, with the Catholic Church? Got ahead of myself. The answer is their observance of Sunday, the first day of the week, as the so-called, quote, Christian Sabbath. That's number one. Number two would be that Charles Spurgeon, Billy Graham, John MacArthur, a lot of these very popular, well-known preachers not only observe Sunday and blaspheme the seventh day, but they also believe in and teach the concept of a Trinity. This Trinitarian false deity worshipped by damn near every Christian is another sign, if you will, another mark or another indicator of Babylon. Now, I'm going to go back up here. I'm going to read this again. It was a fundamental principle of the order of the Jesuits that the end justifies the means. Okay? The end justifies the means for the Jesuit. Here we have high-ranking Freemason Albert Pike. See him here in his regalia. This symbolism is all over Donald Trump, which I've already exposed to you. Right? The double-headed phoenix here, right? All of these symbols I've shown surrounding Trump, because Trump actually graduated from a Jesuit college, if you don't know that. But Albert Pike said, "What we have done for ourselves alone dies with us. What we have done for others in the world remains and is immortal." They operate in secret. They operate in total secret. They lie, they deceive. They do anything by any means necessary. Albert Pike also said this, quote, "Whenever people need a hero, we shall supply him." So every 4 years, every 2 years, whenever your elections are, you're looking for a hero. The Freemasons, they supply them. They're looking for a good pastor, Freemasons will supply them. Looking for a good president, Freemasons will supply him. So you have to understand that these people set up, as it said here in the article, they set up schools, universities, philanthropic organizations in order to deceive people. Look at all the good that they do in the community. Look at all the hospitals. How could they be evil? Look at all the good that they do. He preaches the gospel, brother. What are you talking about? Well, that's just all according to their plan. So, what's interesting is that the Jesuits are, and this is going to go back to another point I made earlier, the Jesuits are essentially the intelligence agency, the secret police of the Roman Catholic Church. And they are sent out into all nations, into all churches, into all mosques, into all temples. They're sent everywhere. They're sent everywhere in the world with the purpose of infiltrating and deceiving and bringing people, holding people in captivity. Okay. And it's interesting that it developed out of the Roman Catholic Church. So what I want to do here is I want to try to make a connection to Paul. So if you go to doubtingpaul.com, you can go to section 2, and we're going to start with 1C here. Section 2, 1C. All wilderness roads lead to Rome. And I'm going to start more toward the end of the article. So I'm reading, quote, "Why was Paul on the wilderness road to begin with? To carry out orders to arrest and kill followers of Jesus. It's always assumed that Paul received his orders to hunt Jesus followers from the Jewish religious elite. And this may have been the case to some extent. But this isn't a very critical analysis. We find Paul consenting to martyr Stephen's death in Acts 7:58 and 8:1. Paul admits to murdering Jesus' followers in Acts 22, verses 4, 5, and Acts 26:10. The Sanhedrin didn't have authority to execute anyone while occupied by the Roman Empire. The jurisdiction placed that within Roman power. In Acts 5:38 and 39, Gamaliel says the following, quote, "And now I say unto you, refrain from these men and let them alone. For if this counsel or this work be of men, it will come to naught. But if it be of God, ye cannot overthrow it, lest haply ye be found even to fight against God." End quote. If this is the same Gamaliel who was Paul's instructor, then why isn't Paul listening to him? Who is calling Paul's shots? In Acts, so real quick here, that calls to mind that Albert Pike quote where he says, "What's done for others, or whatever's done, for others will last and is immortal," and that sort of thing. The Jesuits and the Freemasons, right? They're all the same. They think that what they do is in service to God. They receive the order from the Pope or from their higher level Freemason brother or their higher level Jesuit brother. Hey, go kill this person. Hey, go infiltrate this church, whatever. They think that they're doing God a service by killing all these, quote, so-called heretics, by subjecting these nations to the power of the Pope, right? Which is what Jesus said. He said that those who persecute you will think that they do it in the service of God, but really their father is the devil. I mean, real quick here, talking about killing Christians like what Paul did. These people, let me find it here. It says here that there was no crime too great for them to commit, no deception too base for them to practice, no disguise too difficult for them to assume. It was their studied aim to secure wealth and power, to be devoted to the overthrow of Protestantism and the reestablishment of the papal supremacy. So again, they think they do everything in the service for God, but they don't. And they're willing to kill people for the purpose of it. Let me find that here. It says here, quote, "I furthermore promise and declare that I will, when opportunity present, make and wage relentless war, secretly or openly, against all heretics, Protestants and liberals, as I am directed to extirpate and exterminate them from the face of the whole earth, and that I will spare neither age, sex, or condition, and that I will hang, waste, boil, flay, strangle, and bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women, and crush their infants' heads against the walls." All in service of who? They call this the Society of Jesus? If you're a Roman Catholic, you need to repent and you need to leave that godless religion. It's very clearly godless. This is what your secret police, your secret intelligence agency of Rome does to people like me. Jesus says, love your enemies. The Jesuits say, boil and flay and strangle them. Moving on with my article. In Acts, so remember, the narrative says that the mainstream narrative is that Paul was a student of Gamaliel, yet Paul was out killing people. Gamaliel said, leave this movement alone. If it's of God, it'll be of God, and if it's of men, it'll end. It'll stop. So why wasn't Paul listening to Gamaliel? It's because Paul didn't receive his authority to do what he was doing from the Jewish religious elite. He received his authority from Rome. Continuing in Acts 22, verses 27 and 28, Paul admits that he is a Roman citizen from birth. This is due to the fact that he is part of the Herodian family. In Romans 16:11, Paul says, quote, "Salute Herodian my kinsmen, greet them that be of the household of Narcissus, which are in the Lord." The Herodians were a political group that supported the Herodian dynasty, which ruled parts of Judea under Roman authority. Not only is Paul a Pharisee by admission, but also a Roman citizen, a Herodian. According to Abraham Publications Online Theological Dictionary of the New Testament, 2016, Herodian means, quote, "little Herod." The relative of Paul in question may actually have been Herod, the son of Aristobulus V. Tracing the lineage, we find that Saul was King Agrippa I, and Herod, king of Chalk's first cousin, once removed, and King Agrippa II's first cousin, twice removed. And that is from the article, The Family Background of Paul, the Anti-Vegan Roman, by Chapman Chen. We are warned against the leaven of the scribes, Pharisees, Sadducees, and Herodians by Jesus in Matthew 12, Matthew 16, Mark 12, and Mark 8, and Luke 20. Paul claims to be a Herodian and Roman citizen, in addition to being a Pharisee. Do you notice the conspiracy and the parties involved against the true Jesus movement? It involves the Herodian dynasty in collusion with the Sanhedrin, Pharisees, Sadducees, the scribes, and Roman Empire, and whoever else they could deceive and propagandize into despising the Jesus movement. This is the same Herodian family, mind you, that was responsible for the slaughter of all the firstborn in an effort to assassinate Jesus, Matthew 2. What the Herodians failed to do then was eventually accomplished, air quotes, by the Roman state in collusion with the Roman state, scribes, Sadducees, and Pharisees by the end of the Gospels. However, their plans failed because of the resurrection. So the Jesus movement persisted, despite the increasing persecution too. So it's plausible, based on the evidence we've seen so far, that Paul was working at the behest of his Herodian family on behalf of the Roman government to infiltrate and thwart the Jesus movement that had persisted despite efforts to control it. Everything was done under Roman authority for Roman interests. This supports the idea that perhaps Paul was a spy or intel agent all along. What they couldn't do with their swords, they accomplished with Saul's pen. All roads lead to Rome. So it seems like Paul gives us a blueprint for how the Jesuits eventually operated in the 1500s when they were officially created. So in other words, long before there were even the Jesuits, the Roman government was always placing spies and intel agents and patsies in society, whether it was fringe religious movements, major religious movements, or just society in general. The point was to keep the citizens under control. And Paul, in his supposed encounter with the supposed Jesus, he is operating under the authority of Rome to begin with. I'm not going to go into his alleged encounter. You can read my book here for free. But the point is that Paul is operating much like a Jesuit. Let's go to section 2, 2A. The teacher monitors the test. And I'm just going to read some things here. I'm going to read this section here. I might actually just read the whole thing because I think this chapter is going to sort of highlight and pinpoint Paul's own Jesuitical actions. So the test of Paul's claim to be an apostle is test 1. The second test is of his fruit, for Jesus says that by their fruits we shall know them. So the second issue we can raise regarding Paul is his food menu, which comes with the license to sin in Romans 14 and 1 Corinthians 8. Okay. And his blasphemy in 1 Timothy 4. We will see how Paul says one thing but does another, just like a Pharisee would. And then I should add, just like a Jesuit would as well, right? Pharisees are known for their hypocrisy. Their hypocrisies are very open and blatant, whereas I think a Jesuit would be more careful and disguising of his intent. So let's continue reading. In Revelation, bear with me. This is an important example. It's going to highlight, I think, perfectly well Paul's deceit. In Revelation 1:1, we're told that the Father gave Jesus a revelation, who in turn gave the revelation to an angel, who in turn gave the revelation to John, who in turn gives it to anyone who reads the book. In the book, part of the revelation includes a rebuke by Jesus concerning an interesting issue: meat sacrificed to idols. Paul teaches that eating such things is okay, according to one's, quote, strong conscience. We find that this Pauline doctrine is opposed to James and the apostles, and is even rebuked by Jesus himself, who calls it the doctrine of Balaam. Just as with the test concerning Paul's initial claim, we find the answers are given if we are careful in our analysis of Scripture. His non-committal attitude to the assembly's decision in Acts 15, which is discussed more in depth later, didn't go unnoticed. Jesus Christ himself personally rebukes Paul's menu 3 times in Revelation. Revelation 2, when speaking to the assembly at Ephesus, Revelation 2:14 and 15, assembly at Pergamum, and Revelation 2:20, assembly at Thyatira. Let's see Paul's menu and blasphemy and license to sin on full display. Romans 14, 1 through 3, and 14 through 17, Paul says, quote, one believes that he may eat all things. Another who is weak eateth herbs. So Paul is convinced by Jesus that nothing is unclean itself. Paul defines the food issue as a doubtful disputation, and his conclusion is that nothing is unclean in itself, and that each party should judge or shouldn't judge or despise the other. Paul defines a strong person as someone who can eat anything. A weak person restricts their diet to only herbs. 1 Corinthians 8:4, 7 through 13, we learn the following from Paul, quote, we know an idol is nothing in the world. Paul knows this in verse 4, quote, howbeit there is not in every man that knowledge. Verse 7, take heed lest by any means this liberty, i.e., liberty to eat meat sacrificed to idols, become a stumbling block to them that are weak. Verse 9, but food will not commend us to God. He means whether we eat it or abstain in verse 8. And Paul very clearly identifies himself as having that sort of knowledge, that an idol is nothing, and has liberty to eat food sacrificed to idols. He says, quote, wherefore if meat make my brother to offend, I will eat no flesh while the world standeth, lest I make my brother to offend. End quote. Paul said he becomes weak to the weak, but he also uses his liberty to eat things sacrificed to idols, for he says, quote, I am made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. In other words, Paul will do whatever it takes to save some, even if it means eating meat sacrificed to idols. Isn't that interesting? Is that not interesting? And I quote, or I refer to Matthew 23, verse 15. Matthew 23, verse 15, Jesus pronounces woe on the scribes and Pharisees, calling them hypocrites. Let me pull the verse up for you from a respectable translation here. We'll look at Young's literal translation. Matthew 23, verse 15, Jesus says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because ye go round the sea and the dry land to make one proselyte, and whenever it may happen, ye make him a son of Gehenna twofold more than yourselves. So the Pharisees, like the Jesuits, which are like the Freemasons, according to that article, will go anywhere and do anything necessary to make a convert. But Jesus says that they make them twofold more the child of hell than themselves. So Paul, long before a Jesuit, was operating under Roman authority, doing whatever it took to get in, to infiltrate, and to keep a lid on the Jesus movement. Don't believe me? Look no further than Romans chapter 13, verses 1 through 7. Paul says, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Let's go to verse 3. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he is a minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Wherefore ye must needs be subject. Why? He says for conscience sake. So you can read, I'm not going to read my complete analysis of Romans 13, but again, it's here on my website for free. So Paul is saying, submit yourselves. Government is for your good. And if you do that which is good, then you'll have nothing to worry about. But I say, tell that to Jesus, who did nothing wrong and who was still killed. And the countless martyrs of the Catholic Church who did nothing wrong, who wanted to follow the Bible according to their own conscience, but who still got killed. So you want to talk about conscience sake, Paul? Let people worship God how they want. You don't need to go about killing them and flaying them and boiling them and strangling them and burying them alive like a Jesuit. You don't need to chase them from house to house, from city to city under the authority of Rome to kill them. You don't have to infiltrate their church and try to, water down the message. But this is what Jesuits do, and this is what Paul did. Paul came in and he taught something different from what the assembly was teaching. Again, my book will show this. It will show that he taught a different gospel. It will show that he taught a different menu of food items. Jesus rebukes what Paul taught. Jesus rebukes what Jesuits teach. So I think that that's really all that needs to be said on the subject. Except for this. Here's the point. It's interesting that they cite Charles Haddon Spurgeon without knowing that he's a Freemason. Okay. And what's crazy is that these people are Paulinists as well. And they don't see that Paul is behaving like a Jesuit. So now you see how the deception works. As Albert Pike said, if you're looking for a hero, we will supply him for you. People cannot let go of this stuff. People can't let go of Charles Haddon Spurgeon. They can't let go of Paul. They can't let go of these people who are obvious agents of Rome. And the reason they're obvious agents of Rome is because they're teaching things like the Trinity. I mean, you go on and on and on and on down the list. Protestantism is born of the Roman Catholic Church. Let me find some verses here. In Revelation 17, verse 5, says, and upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. So who are the harlots here? The Protestant churches. The Protestant churches that still keep Sunday. The Protestant churches that believe in and worship the false Trinity. The Protestant churches who believe in and teach the false virgin birth. The Protestant churches that still accept Paul and his 13 epistles. The Protestant churches that happily pay taxes to Caesar, send their women and their sons and daughters off to fight in wars of these nation states. I mean, because you got to be subject to the rulers because they're ordained of God. So all of this is the fruit of Rome. All of it is for the purpose of keeping mankind in subjection. And they'll stop at nothing to do it. They'll infiltrate your church. They'll infiltrate your mosque. They'll infiltrate your home. They will propagandize you through television and radio, video games, all forms of entertainment. So, lastly, I didn't really go over the chart, but if you can see it, I'll just break it down for you. Over here is the Vatican, and the top dog is the Black Pope, I believe is what he's called, the Black Pope. And the Black Pope is the head over the Jesuits. And the Jesuits are in the Illuminati, the Club of Rome, the Council of Foreign Relations, the Opus Dei, international bankers, the Masons, and the Mafia. And then over here, they have written New Age movement, etc. But I think here, included with the New Age movement would be mainstream Christianity, because mainstream Christianity is teaching the same thing that the Pope believes and teaches, the same thing that the Jesuits are fighting for. Things like Paulinism, Sunday, the Trinity. Okay, all roads lead to Rome. So that's it. This is first study of what I hope to be a regular ongoing series. So next time I am on, I will just simply be reading the first chapter of that book. Let me introduce you to the book again so that you know where to find it. You can find it for free on my website, anabaptistapologist.com. Scroll all the way down, click Rulers of Evil, and we will begin reading soon. Now, I'm not actually going to read the preface, forward, or orientation. When I start reading, I'm going to start right away with chapter 1. So if you want to, go ahead and read this stuff on your own time, just as I have. It's very interesting. But I'm going to start in chapter 1. And the chapters don't look very long. So we'll read all 318 pages together. It's going to take some time, but I think that it's going to help us understand the nature of the enemy that we're fighting against. Enter the kingdom now. Get in now. So, shalom, peace. Have a good week.
Thank you for watching. What Jesus says to one, he says to all. Repent and believe the gospel, for the kingdom of God and of heaven is at hand.